Welcome to another episode, another adventure from the town too tough to die, Tombstone, Arizona. This is the Tales of Old Tombstone, brought to you by the Tombstone Monument Ranch. And here we go. It's Bob Boze and Stuart Rosebrook. They're on. They have a story for you, just for you.
To the town of our free rode a stranger one fine day. Hardly spoke to folks around him, didn't have too much to say. No one dared to ask his business, no one dared to make a slip. The stranger there among them had a big iron on his hip, big iron on his hip.
Welcome to Tales of Old Tombstone. Today, this is Stuart Rosebrook with Bob Boze and our special guest, Brad Courtney. Today, we're going to be talking about Virgil Earp, Prescott, and the Earps and Doc Holliday, and how they got to Prescott and down to Tombstone. This is part 2, and we're getting into some real details today about Virgil Earp. Bob and Brad, welcome to the show today.
Good morning.
Good to be here.
So, Bob, we're going to start with you. When was the first time you started doing any research on Virgil Earp, and what have you always thought about the older brother, Virgil, in comparison to Wyatt and Morgan and the others?
Well, I always felt that Allie had a lot of gravitas in the story because she was very miffed at Wyatt's ascension to being superhero. And she, in the 1940s, she lived quite a while. She pronounced them all as gingerbread, the stories about Wyatt. And I've always thought that was a typical sister-in-law's comment about somebody in the family. And I thought it had a certain gravitas. How do you feel about that, Brad?
I think it's interesting. I kind of wonder the conversations that Allie and Virgil had, when all that was happening. But that was after, Stuart Lake came along and did the book. And, but I've never seen any problems between Wyatt and Virgil. I've never ever saw Virgil say anything negative about his brother Wyatt. But, yeah, same thing. I just got to order something yesterday, and they used to have that Wyatt Earp comic book. And on the front, it had him 6'6". And all muscle, and truly they made him into have you guys seen that? It's great stuff, but yeah, on the front every time 6'6", raw muscle, and truly a superhero. And that,
well, and that's what's fascinating is that's how we all people of the Boomer generation, which I'm a part of, that's how we came to the story, was the Hugh O'Brien version, the Stuart Lake version, and he was the superhero. So you can imagine how chagrined Allie was that her husband was kind of playing second fiddle here, and you can imagine that she was pretty upset about it. Now, she allegedly, she was a housekeeper, house cleaner, is it, in L.A., and that's how Frank Waters met her, and he set out to unmask Wyatt Earp. And there's some, maybe you know about this, Brad, there's some who claim, some historians claim that Allie later disowned those comments and felt that Frank Waters had done a hatchet job on Wyatt. Do you buy that?
Yeah, I do. And I was looking at it last night, and, what was her name? Jane Candia?
Yeah.
Later rectified that. And here's Coleman. Here's an example, is that Waters said that Allie said that Tombstone was never Virgil's idea. And then Candia Coleman comes along and say it was his idea, that Virgil brought it up. He heard about Tombstone, and, she didn't want to hear it. And that was just one of the big changes that was made. But yeah, I've heard that too. She was really upset. I think he just went too far.
Yeah. Let's back up a little bit for our listeners who maybe don't know this story that well. Kind of sketch into us how the Earps and Holliday came to Prescott and ended up in Tombstone. Let's back up and tell that story. Can you do that?
Yeah, you bet. So yeah, the whole family was together. I don't know if Wyatt was with him at the time. I'm sure he was, but they were coming across. They had moved back and forth, and um, I don't know if Virgil always planned to come to Prescott. I think he did, but it was 1877, and they were coming across the Santa Fe Trail, and then Virgil dropped down. And
where were they coming from?
I don't know.
Weren't they coming from Wichita and Dodge City? And they
I think so.
Wyatt Earp told that story that Dodge City had lost its snap. The cattle trade had kind of declined and moved further west, and so he's looking for other opportunities. And somebody sent him a letter, was it? And then they set off and wagon trains to head, and they eventually landed in Arizona. Is that the way you?
Well,
and that so. Yeah, of course, Virgil was here 77 through 79. So you're talking about when Wyatt decides to
leave Dodge City.
Come this way. And he went through Las Vegas, New Mexico. And I wonder if he just took the same trail that Virgil did. But Virgil was, the constable here, and he started hearing about, and for listeners, here is Prescott, where I live. But I believe he started sending letters to Wyatt. And Wyatt was getting a little, maybe bored. I don't know, in Dodge, and he got the hell out of there and came through Las Vegas, New Mexico, and for some reason Doc wanted to go, and that's a whole other story I'm looking at. But and they got here to Prescott, and I think I don't even know if Wyatt unpacked.
Really, he just glanced on through. But let's back up with. Virgil, they came down into Camp Verde, is that correct? And they were there. I think she tells the story about being a midwife.
Yeah, they were there. They weren't there very long, but she was friends with the Jackson, I believe it was, lady. They're good friends. And then Newton actually was with the group, and he went ahead, and he's the guy that found the sawmill, the abandoned sawmill, him and his wife Jenny. And Virgil, the way we see it, is he was running mail back and forth from Camp Verde to Prescott.
And what do you think that route was? Did they come up over Mingus Mountain, or was that not a route yet?
Yeah, I think that was it was below that, the way I see it. So, and today, for locals will know what I'm saying, pretty much followed a trail over to I-17 and then 169, and then dropped down and then over to 69 and over. Roughly, very roughly.
What are the towns in that route? Is that Camp Verde to Dewey? Where are we?
It's the Crook Trail. We have to remember that General Crook had been here prior to the Earps' arrival in the Yavapai Apache War, and had developed the Crook Trail to connect Fort Whipple with Fort Verde, and then Fort Verde up the rim to Fort Apache across the Mogollon Rim. And in establishing the route from Prescott to between the forts, he also established camps, overnight camps. And there are, if you follow the get off the road, and the road does today from Prescott to Camp Verde, roughly follow the trail, followed the water stops all the way across from Prescott across Lonesome Valley, known as Prescott Valley today. The Agua Fria River crosses there in Dewey, and then they would have followed the Crook Trail would have hit water stops, and I have seen on horseback some of the remnants of those little stone corrals where they would have stopped overnight en route down through Copper Canyon to Fort Verde. And so those routes would have been well established, and there also was a stage route that had been established between the two territorial capitals of Santa Fe and Prescott. And so there were some established routes. They weren't having to bushwhack themselves across from New Mexico up to Prescott. There were well-established wagon routes and military roads that they would have followed, and there would have been freighters and it would have been a very busy road because it was the main road of commerce between two of the primary encampments and towns in central Arizona at the time the Earps arrived.
That would have been south of Venus?
So, Brad,
Yes.
So then Virgil and them are at the sawmill, and that's where in today's vernacular, where is that exactly? Is that close to Prescott? Is it in Prescott?
Yeah, today it is. That's considered part of Prescott. And there's a little park there, but that's the rumor that where the park is there, where Virgil lived. But Virgil's everywhere to some people, and he provided all the lumber for everybody. But and I believe that he was squatting because we went to look for the records of Virgil owning any property in Prescott, and we can't find any. So I think that Newton found that sawmill and settled there, squatted there, and then Virgil was doing his run back and forth, and eventually they decided, probably in the summer of '77, they moved from Camp Verde and lived with Newton and his wife Jenny, and Jenny wasn't happy with the church life in Prescott, and that's why they ended up going somewhere else.
Tell me about that. There wasn't a church, or there was the wrong church?
Well, here's the confusing part. She was a devout Methodist, and but the story of the churches, I think I told in the last broadcast when Tombstone was being founded, I remember a blurb in the Arizona Miner, and they were making fun of Tombstone because he didn't have a church. And this was, it started 79, 80, and Tombstone had a church by 1880. Prescott, was founded in 1864, and there was no church in Prescott until 1875. And so they had nothing to brag about. And historian Drew Desmond discovered that it was several different denominations with the church, but it was a Methodist church. So the Methodist Church can actually say they're the longest established. We wouldn't call it a business, but that Methodist Church is still here, not the same building, but it's moved around. But that for a long time there was no church life in Prescott, and they would meet on the plaza where the courthouse is now, and that's where they have church. But there was a real concern about that.
That's excellent. Bring us up to speed again, and let's revisit the incident that made Virgil Earp a lawman. I've always thought that he was like Wyatt and was acting as a lawman with his brother and stuff. But there was really one incident in Prescott that put him on the map and, in fact, made him probably a shoe-in to be the city marshal in Tombstone. And how did that come off? Tell us that.
And Bob, Bob and Brad, we're going to take a quick break there, and we're going to leave that as a little cliffhanger as we come back with Brad Courtney, and he's going to tell us how Virgil Earp earned his badge in Prescott, Arizona. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Bob, and thank you, Brad. I said at the beginning we're going to tell you a Tombstone story. Well, we've got lots of stories, and thank you very much. We always enjoy it, and we can hardly wait till part 2 to find out the rest of the story. Hey, my name is Stan Houston, and I am the founder and the leader of the Cowboy Spirit Radio Network, and it's our privilege and pleasure to bring this program to you. And we are always here to help you bring your Western story to life. So perhaps you want to reach out to me from time to time and to say, hey, could you do a cowboy show for me too? We probably could help you and put you on the network. Stan at StanHouston.com. Stan at StanHouston.com. Or if you want to try Stan at WITRadio.net. Stan at WITRadio.net. And, of course, this fine program comes to you from Tombstone, Arizona, right from the Tombstone Monument Ranch, one of the premier, very unique guest ranches in the whole wide world of the West. So here we go. Please reach out to the website at tombstonemonumentranch.com. That's tombstonemonumentranch.com. see the stories, see the pictures, and say, hey, this would be fun. Maybe we should do that this coming summer. Let's go west to the Tombstone Monument Ranch. And now, back to the program.
We are back with Bob Boze and Brad Courtney, and we're talking the Earps, specifically Virgil Earp, and we want to learn from Brad how Virgil Earp earned his badge in Prescott, Arizona. Brad?
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing. Did Virgil have any lawman experience in Dodge? And the way his biographer puts it, that there's just no evidence besides that Virgil said he did, that he was ever a lawman in Dodge. And that'd be really helpful if we could ever find anything about that. But yeah, so the story is, it's a great story. And I'm looking at, this is an article I wrote for the magazine True West. And I'm staring right here at the beautiful artwork by Bob Boze of Virgil and Prescott standing on Gurley Street with his Winchester, with Thumb Butte in the background. So I really appreciate that art, Bob. And I know a copy of it sits at the Heritage Center as well in Prescott. So anyway, Virgil, it was in October. I forget the exact. I think it was October 17th, 1877. And I'll back up. Virgil was in town. But there were these two guys in town, and some recent research by Peter Brand shows that these guys were around a little while. Their names were George Wilson and Robert Tullis, and they became friends somehow. But George Wilson was a bad, nasty cuss. He just was a bad guy. And he was wanted in Montague County, Texas, for the murder of a deputy sheriff, Robert Broadus, and they were bringing Robert Broadus was bringing George Wilson to trial, and somehow George Wilson got a gun and shot Broadus, and he escaped, and somehow he ends up in Prescott. And I don't know how this man, Colonel William Paul, knew George Wilson, but he was in a bar called the Jackson and Tompkins, which, by the way, we were just talking about the mail route. That's where the mail route ended from Camp Verde. And but Colonel William McCall, he was from Pennsylvania. He was actually brevetted general during the Civil War, fought at Gettysburg. So he was quite a guy himself. But he's in the Jackson and Tompkins saloon. He's playing billiards, and these two guys walk in, George Wilson and Tullis. They surround Colonel McCall, and they start making threats. And the threats were basically keep your mouth shut, because they knew. I don't know what Tullis had to do with the murder in Montague County, but McCall knew that Wilson was wanted for murder of Broadus in Montague County, and they were telling him to keep his mouth shut. And McCall somehow slips out of the Jackson Tompkins saloon, goes over to the Justice of Peace, C.F. Cate, tells them this murderer was in town, and he gave the name Vaughn. I don't know if that's what McCall thought, but or if that was what Wilson was going by, and told him about this murder of Broadus, and that we need to go arrest this guy. Well, while McCall was doing that, these guys, Wilson and Tullis, were pretty intoxicated, and they stepped out of the Jackson and Tompkins saloon, which faces the courthouse plaza. It's on Montezuma Street. It's just down below the palace. It's today about 4 doors down, 4 doors south, and there's an art gallery there now. But they step out, and if you've been to Prescott, the dog walking place in town is the plaza. They call it the square sometimes. They step out, and there was this lady walking her dog, and they start shooting at the dog. And so,
oh my God,
every time
supposed to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I mean, they were just jerks, just big jerks. And so McCall shows up with the Prescott constable, Frank Murray, and they come and they serve the warrant to Wilson. Wilson thinks he's being arrested for shooting at the dog. And, McCall and Murray kind of go, no, you're wanted for murder, and we're gonna take you in. And I don't know what Tullis had to do with it, but these guys somehow backed out. They get on their horses. They escape. They head south on Montezuma, and then they take a ride on Granite Street. And when they're riding, it's just like in an old, the Western. They're shooting their guns to the left and right, making a racket, which was always confusing to me because, you'll see that there was a posse formed, and I was always going, how did these other lawmen? How did Virgil not hear those guns? So Murray figures, they're going to need help. And McCall is going to be part of this posse. And here's what I discovered since I wrote the article. There was the first Palace saloon in Prescott was actually on Gurley Street, and it was 1877. But this particular palace was not related to today's palace. That's been a mistake that's been made for years now. So that's why you see the palace's kind of mottos. They've been serving rough customers since 1877. I discovered it's a totally different palace. And one of the owners of this palace was Wiley Standifer, the U.S. Marshal. And they had just opened this palace. And the only possible thing that could have happened was Virgil was in that palace having a conversation with Standifer, and also in the saloon would have been Ed Bowers. He was the Yavapai County Sheriff. And Murray finds him, tells them about this Wilson and Tullis. They form a posse, and this took some time. So, when I first was researching this, I'm thinking, these guys are going to be way down the trail. I mean, they had an opportunity to get the heck out of town. Well, McCall and Standifer, they get on a horse-drawn buggy, but it can only carry two people. Bowers has a horse. Murray has a horse. And even though Virgil's in town, he must have walked in because he didn't have his horse with him. But he had his Winchester rifle, and he was a Civil War veteran. So he was deputized. So for a brief moment, Virgil was a deputy sheriff in Prescott. Well,
what I love about this story is you've never seen this in any old B Western or 50s Western of the lawmen are in a buggy, and then they deputize Virgil. They say, we don't have any room for you, so you're going to have to go on foot. So he starts running down the board. I just love it. We've never seen this, and yet the truth is even stranger. This is so wonderful.
And being, I'm a runner. I've been a runner my whole life, and I look like a runner. You've seen pictures of Virgil, and I'm going.
He's not a runner.
He's not. He's not one of those.
No.
No. He's not Jim Ryan or any of those guys, but he's going to keep up on foot. And then here's my favorite part. You talk about a B Western. This would have been a great B Western film, and it's almost Blazing Saddles in a way. So what had happened was Wilson and Tullis went south on Montezuma shooting their guns. Then they took a right on Granite Street. And for anybody that's not a local, these streets all connect, and it's right downtown. And I need to change that. They took a right on Goodwin Street and then down Granite. And I'm thinking, these guys are way down the trail. Well, today on Granite Creek, there's a junior high school, the Mile High Middle High. Boy, it's hard to say in the morning. Mile High Middle School. It's right on the banks of Granite Creek. So McCall and Standifer in their little buggy, and they follow the trail that they've been told. They take a right on Goodwin, and then a left on Granite Street. And Wilson and Tullis, you talk about not being rocket scientists. They actually stopped, dismounted, lit up their cigarettes. They had their pistols at their side. McCall and Stanford in their buggy ride right by them. They miss them. And then Wilson, you talk about being intoxicated. Wilson yells at them, and this is recorded right in the Prescott paper. "Don't run over us, you son of a," fill the blank. And they actually wrote it that way. Son of a B, and then, blank, 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 blank. And then McCall goes, "That's them." And they stop. So they're below the two bad guys. Here comes Bowers and Murray on their horses. They stop. They see them. And now everybody's got their guns drawn. And Virgil had kept up. But he only had to go like a half mile. So it was really fortunate for him. But he gets in between Bowers and Murray to the north, and McCall and Stanford to the south. And then Wilson, they tell them to throw up their hands, but they're just crazy guys. I can you imagine Tullis after Wilson says, "Don't run over us," looking at him like, "You fool, you idiot." And then Wilson, after they told him to surrender, Wilson yells out, "Lord, have mercy on me, poor worthless son of a gun." And he really was. And they opened fire, and according to the report, a lot of the bullets came from Virgil's Winchester, and this tallest guy was hit. Wilson was hit in the head. Could have been by Virgil's rifle, but Virgil was given a lot of credit as the one who actually brought these guys down. But he was in a good spot.
To me, this is he made his bones that day. He all of a sudden was on the map, and
right.
As we fast forward, doesn't he replace the constable who deputized him? He wins an election. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's interesting. But here's the thing about that Virgil actually wins the election for constable, but they had two constables at the time. But Virgil got more votes than Frank Murray did, and but Frank Murray was still a constable because they had two of them at the time. And
so this is the event that really puts Virgil on the map, and probably makes him a shoe-in to be the city marshal when he goes on to Tombstone. Is that correct, or do you think that's too much?
I would think so. I think that would look good on his resume.
Yeah.
And
it propels him right into being the city marshal there, which we all know where that goes. But now let's back up a little bit and maybe talk about where's Doc Holliday in all this mess.
And Bob, let's take a break right there. And we have to thank our sponsors here in another break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp's arrival in Prescott and they're meeting up with Constable Virgil Earp and where their trails depart. We'll be back in a moment on Tales of Old Tombstone.
Hi, this is Bob Bell, and if you want to have an inside track on two of the most famous characters in the West, that would be Wyatt Earp and his compadre, Doc Holliday, then you need to pick up the Illustrated Life and Times of Wyatt Earp and the Illustrated Life and Times of Doc Holliday, revised 3rd edition. Now, these are books that I first published back in 1993. They've been in the 4th, 5th edition. They keep selling out, and there's a reason. I included the best maps and the best timeline to give you an overview of who these guys really were. And that means the truth, warts and all. I don't duck any of the stuff because these are controversial cats, you may know, if you've ever seen a movie on them. But I've heavily, profusely illustrated. I've updated them. There's a couple of mistakes that were made, or new evidence has come out, and in each edition, I've updated it and made them better. So check it out. That's Bob Boze Bell's Illustrated Life and Times of Wyatt Earp and the Illustrated Life and Times of Doc Holliday, both available to order with an autograph at the66kids.com. And I guarantee that if my signature is in these books someday, they'll be worth the cover price.
We're back with Bob Boze Bell and Brad Courtney on Tales of Old Tombstone, and we're talking about Virgil Earp and his life in Prescott when he earned his badge as constable, and then how his life changes when his younger brother Wyatt and his soon-to-be good friend Doc Holliday arrive from Las Vegas, New Mexico. And take it from there, Brad. Tell us what happens, how they arrive, and then give us a little preview of what you've been working on Doc Holliday in Prescott as the Earps move on to Tombstone.
You got it. So when this incident happened in 1877, of course, Wyatt was still in Dodge. And Doc, he's kind of a semi-nomadic guy. And he was really sick at the time. And that's why he went toward Las Vegas. He left Dodge and went with Kate to toward Las Vegas, but he was so sick, according to Kate, they had to stop in Trinidad, Colorado, and to have Doc recuperate a bit. But he, eventually he did, and I forget the name. There was some guy that actually remembered taking Doc and Kate to the Montezuma Hot Springs, and he recalled Doc being sick, but he recalled Doc's girlfriend had a German accent, and of course, Kate was Hungarian, but she grew up with German people. But so yeah, that's where they were when Virgil was being the constable. He actually drove a stage for a while from Prescott, and this is where Stuart, you know the trails better, but he was driving a stage at first before he became a night watchman first before he became a constable. So there's a series of things, but when he drove the stage from Prescott to Gillette, the Tip Top Mine, Virgil had a big personality, and so when he would get back to Prescott, there'd be a Prescott reporter waiting to hear news from the Tip Top and what was going on along the trail, and Virgil was kind of the spokesman.
And that's the Black Canyon stage. Most people think that it started, it was, quote, Prescott to Phoenix, but it actually, the Black Canyon stage line originally just went to Gillette. It was only as Phoenix is developing that they developed the line further. And so connecting the commerce and there was a lot of mining operations and encampments between Gillette and Prescott on the Black Canyon stage. That's they're developing the main route south to Phoenix. And the stage would have serviced all the little communities, including King Woolsey's, Agua Frio, which we know is kind of Dewey Humboldt today. So it would have followed the Big Bug Creek out of town down to Gillette. And,
when I drive to Prescott, twice a year or whatever it is, I always look over there where Tip Top was, and I think about Virgil on that route. And that, even by car, that's a route. You go up those canyons and Bloody Basin and Big Bug Creek and all of that area. That's a rough route he was on.
That's a mess.
Oh yeah, and he had to have been, as a veteran, he was well armed and fearless, and because the Black Canyon route from Prescott to Gillette was known as a route that was vulnerable to stage robbers, but I don't think he would have messed with Virgil Earp.
Exactly.
It was actually, I believe there's the stage was robbed twice in the same place in this area, wasn't it, on that route?
Probably
I
on
know there's a
Arasta
story
Creek.
about Bill Brazelton doing a robbery there when the owner of what's now the Palace Saloon, Dan Thorne, and there's a whole story with Bill Brazelton, which is a whole different story. If you don't mind, let me back up a bit with the stagecoach, because there's been some debate as to whether Virgil or Wyatt actually drove a stage from San Bernardino, California, to Prescott. But I got to tell the story, because the younger sister Adelia told the story that Virgil was driving the stagecoach from San Bernardino, and Wyatt was with him. And if this is true, it's such a great story. But she claims that Wyatt was riding along with Virgil. Virgil takes Wyatt to a bar on Whiskey Row, and Wyatt starts drinking. This is probably when Wyatt was, a teenager, 17, 18 years old. And they get him really drunk. Just terrible drunk. And then Wyatt was so sick. Virgil goes, well, the cure for that is drink some more. And he did. And he got sicker. And according to Sister Adelia, that's why Wyatt was kind of a teetotaler. Virgil got him so sick on Whiskey Row that he never wanted to drink again. But how can you not tell that story? You don't see it in the books.
It's one of the contentions in the Wyatt Earp story is that one of his advantages was in Dodge and in Tombstone is that he was a teetotaler, and so this would speak to that a little bit. And I was under the understanding that was a freight line that he was on between San Bernardino to Prescott. That's a long hike. Well, anyway, we won't argue that. But the point is that Earp later in Alaska allegedly had a little bit of a drinking problem, but that's contentious as well. So yes, drinking and Wyatt Earp is there's a lot to be discovered there.
Right.
And isn't it true that when Wyatt, from what I've read in both in Casey Teffertiller's biography of Wyatt Earp as well as Gary Roberts' biography of Doc Holliday, that the entrepreneurship of the Earps, they were always looking for an edge or to have something to start when they got to a town. And Wyatt Earp supposedly had a buckboard that he had bought in Dodge City and was driving to Tombstone to start a stage line. But when they got to Tombstone, they realized that they were a day late and a dollar short. Their stage line had already been set up between Tucson and Tombstone, and so they had to look for other opportunities. And so Wyatt was eager not to hang around Prescott. He had goals of setting up a new business and a new life away from being a lawman. And so bring us up to date on, was it November 1879 that Wyatt, James, Doc, and their the women and their families arrive in Prescott, the territorial capital, and Virgil's waiting them, and they weren't all there very long, but Doc stayed behind. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, and it's believed that Kate was with Doc. There's some doubt among historians whether Kate was telling the truth, but I don't see any other alternative. But yeah, they showed up, and it actually it was announced in the Arizona Miner. Right in the middle of November. It was November 15th, something like that. They got his name wrong again. They said E.W. Earp is getting ready to head down to Tombstone, and they made fun of that name. We stay away from tombstones and all that. But yeah, they actually announced that Virgil was packed up and ready to go. Wyatt really wasn't really well known in Prescott. He and neither was Doc really. When Doc got here, he wasn't the Doc Holliday of Tombstone, but they did mention that Virgil was ready to head out, and I think in my mind, they had to leave mid. I don't think they left as late as late November, but I think just shortly after mid-November, I think they had to head down. Because Stuart, you would know better than me, but how long does it take on stagecoach and on a stage to get from Prescott to Tombstone?
Well, Doc, the Earps would have taken their buckboards, and still it would have taken them, let's say, at least a couple of days or more, 2 or 3 days. It just depends on how much they were hauling with them down the Black Canyon to get to the early settlements of Phoenix, if they went into Phoenix or if they went to Fort McDowell, depending on which route they decided to take. But going to Phoenix, they would have been able to resupply. And then, it's the winter time, so it's a good time to travel down through the desert and follow the track probably through Saskatoon, following the water and the communities down into Tucson, and then down to Tombstone.
And they spent a couple of days in Tucson, didn't they?
Yeah, I think they most likely did, and we know that Doc Holliday and Kate did later on there when they eventually made their way to when Doc made his way to Tombstone in August of the following year, but
80,
in 1880.
One of my favorite stories comes from Allie, and she said, well, first of all, they stopped in Phoenix, and it was 150 people in town, which I love that story. But then they're approaching, I believe, Casa Grande. They're down there somewhere in that area. And a freighter comes through and has the right-of-way, and Virgil pulls over, and the freighter pulls his big team very close and nicks one of Virgil's horses. And Virgil is so mad, he goes after the guy, and he stops at basically a truck stop in that era. And Allie says that he just kept pounding the pudding out of him. The guy would try to get up, and Virgil just kept punching him out. I didn't love that story.
Yeah, Virgil wasn't. He would use his fists. Right before they left, he was on his property in Thumb Butte, and there was this guy named Frank Schultz. I think he was looking for silver or something like that, and he discovered some actually. But he was walking around on Virgil's property, and there was another guy named Hanson, and Frank Schultz comes into town. He's all bruised and battered, and he said that Virgil beat the snot out of him, and this other guy Hanson. So yeah, he wasn't. He would use his fists, and he's a big fellow too.
Well, Brad, we're going to jump forward here, and we're going to let you preview an event coming up, and we'll have you back on for part 3. But give us a preview of what is going to be happening in Prescott in August in 2024. Very exciting news, and then we'll have you back on to talk a lot more. We'll take a deep dive just on Doc Holliday in Prescott. So what's happening this August here in Prescott?
Oh, thank you for asking, because yeah, it's exciting. It's been a nice little journey for me getting this done. But yeah, I you know that Doc lived with this guy named Richard Elliott, who was and I'm wondering if Doc didn't live, when Kate was here. I kind of wondered that if he didn't live in Elliott's house as well. And Elliott was actually a friend of Virgil's, so I wonder if Virgil kind of recommended Doc. But when Doc came back from Las Vegas, settling up some business there in May of 1880, he moved in with Richard Elliott, and that's the information I had, that that this Elliott is who he lived with. And we always get a kick out of this. Also living in that house was John Gosper, who was the acting governor. So we got Richard Elliott, a temperance leader in Prescott, and the acting governor, John Gosper, and you got Doc Holliday living with them. Well, I gave it to a researcher friend. Her name is Sue Kissel, and she went deep into the archives at Charlotte Hall, and she comes back, and I was sitting there, and she has the lot numbers where Richard Elliott's house was, the the deeds and everything like that. So we were able to pinpoint exactly where that house is. And I thought we need to get a marker there. So did a little campaign, fundraising campaign, got the money for it. We just put a down payment, and basically the plaque's going to sit where Richard Elliott's house was, and talks about Doc living there with Gosper and Elliott and so on. And Doc's birthday is August 14th, so we're planning an unveiling event, and the details will come later. And we're working with the Heritage Foundation, Prescott Western Heritage Foundation, with the center there that's right on Montezuma Street, tremendous place, and having an event, and the details will come later on that. But yeah, hopefully we can get you guys all up here and have a good time.
Well, it's great news, Brad. This is just tremendous. And Bob, did you ever think anything like that would happen up here in Prescott in all the years that you've promoted and written about Doc Holliday?
Well, it's about damn time, is what I think. And thank you, Brad, for finally stepping up. I've always thought it was a missed opportunity, and very appreciative of all the work you've done.
Well, I appreciate it, and I got to give the credit to the smartest thing I did was get help, and I wouldn't have been able to do it without Sue Kissel. She's a volunteer at Charlotte Hall. She does genealogy work, but yeah, I'm gonna get her to help with the unveiling and everything. But yeah, it's very exciting to drive by that place, and we'll have a plaque there, and that's where he lived, you know. And it's right behind Gurley Street where all the bars were. So Doc Holliday was with easy walking distance to all the bars there. So it was ideal for him. And, you know, that's what he was doing at the time, was gambling. He wasn't even practicing dentistry. He was gambling on Whiskey Row. So he was right there where he could go to work every day, every night.
Well, Brad and Bob, thank you very much for this great episode on Virgil Earp, Doc Holliday, and Wyatt in Prescott. We will be back with our next episode with Brad, and we're going to talk about the connection, the gambling and saloon business connection between Prescott and Tombstone on Tales of Old Tombstone. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you back on the radio next week.
Big iron on his head. Big iron, big iron. When he tried to match the ranger with a big iron on his hip. Big iron on his head.